Today on Jerusalem Dateline, the U.S. and the U.K. launch retaliatory strikes against the Houthis in Yemen in response to Houthi attacks on shipping traffic in the Red Sea. Israel defends itself against South Africa's accusation of genocide in the World Court. Plus, evangelical leaders bear witness to the events of October 7th. And tens of thousands beseech God at the Western Wall for mercy and breakthrough in the war with Hamas. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The U.S. and the U.K., along with the support of 4 other nations, launched a massive retaliatory attack against the Houthis in Yemen. The strikes come after weeks of attacks on shipping in the Red Sea by the Iranian-backed group. President Biden authorized the strikes that hit at least 16 military sites in Yemen. Since November 19th, the Houthis have hit ships from 40 different countries.
These attacks against vessels in the Red Sea pose a direct threat to lives, to freedom of navigation, and to global trade in one of the world's most critical waterways.
The Houthi attacks have had a major impact on global trade, since around 15% of that trade flows through the Red Sea.
What's happened because of these Houthi attacks against commercial shipping is that thousands of ships have had to divert, take longer routes, pay more for insurance, and that gets translated into higher prices for people for everything from fuel to medicine to food.
On Thursday, the UN Security Council condemned in the strongest terms the Houthi attacks. The attacks come as Israel is keeping up its assault on Hamas in Gaza, but facing criticism from some in the U.S. On Capitol Hill, Senator Bernie Sanders introduced a resolution that could cut aid to Israel. The Senate is scheduled to vote this Tuesday on a bill targeted at Israel that would require the State Department to report every 30 days on alleged human rights violations in foreign countries. If the State Department fails to issue a report, all security assistance to Israel would be cut. And at the International Court of Justice, Israel is defending itself after South Africa put forward its argument that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Yet one more front facing Israel during its darkest hour since the Holocaust. CBN's war correspondent Chuck Holton has been reporting on Israel's war with Hamas since it started. Because of his military background, it's always interesting to hear his perspective. We caught up with him recently for an update. Chuck, great to be with you. You know, it's been more than 100 days since October 7th. October 27th was when the ground campaign began in Gaza. How would you assess how the IDF is doing since it began its ground campaign?
Before the ground campaign, they dropped over 30,000 bombs on Gaza. So that really prepared the battlefield for them. And it made it, in some ways, more difficult, and in some ways easier. That's one of the reasons you see so many of these large D9 Caterpillar bulldozers going in ahead of the troops, because they had to actually make roads where the roads had been completely demolished. And if you look at the before and after pictures of Gaza, the northern part of Gaza is without a doubt going to take probably decades to rebuild. And so in one sense, I would say that they're doing very well in that, in creating a buffer zone between them and the Palestinians. In another sense, the question is, who's probably going to end up paying to rebuild it? And I hate to say it, but it's probably going to be the United States.
Yeah, how would you assess the kind of difficulty there is? Urban warfare is a very difficult warfare. And how about the tunnels? How difficult has it been for IDF soldiers there with the boots on the ground?
Well, the problem is you can never really clear any place. You can sweep through an area, make sure that there are no bad guys in there, and you think you're safe, and then the bad guys pop out of a hole in the ground someplace and shoot you from behind. So that adds another level of complexity to the fight.
The Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, said that Gaza Strip was the largest terror base in the world. Were you surprised at the amount of tunnels, the amount of weapons they found almost in every building, whether it's a mosque or a school or a home?
Oh, absolutely. It was absolutely astounding to me that we started this thing thinking that Gaza was a city of 2.5 million people that had some military stuff in it that they would have to go and dig out. What we found after they went in there is that Gaza is a giant military base with a bunch of civilians in it. And virtually everything in Gaza has been militarized or weaponized in one way or another. And then that leaves the question of what do the Gazans do once this is over and everything has been destroyed? There won't be any services, there won't be any water, there won't be any electricity. This is going to be like starting from scratch, but they're going to have to move out all the rubble first. And so we're nowhere close to answering those questions yet. And my big question is how is all that going to work on the day after the war ends?
Yeah, that's the big debate here in Israel. What does happen to Gaza the day after? Gaza is one story, but perhaps an even bigger front is up north with Hezbollah. How dangerous do you see the fact that, or what could happen if, as they say, the north opens up?
Well, I think the IDF is starting to see the writing on the wall and say that, we're going to have to go into Lebanon. We cannot send our people back to live in their homes near the border if they are going to continue shooting rockets across the border on a daily basis. And so we're going to have to put a stop to that. And the only way they're going to be able to do it, they're not going to be able to bomb their way out of that conundrum. They're going to have to go in on the ground in Lebanon and push Hezbollah back behind the Litani River, just like they're supposed to be anyway. Now, the United States is pushing back hard on that notion. The United States does not want that to open up. Of course, the IDF doesn't want it to open up either, but they're going to have to do what they have to do to fix this problem. But Israel still can't live with the status quo. So they're going to have to do something. And I think what we're seeing now is them preparing to go into Lebanon if it comes to that.
Looking ahead, Chuck, what are your thoughts?
Oh, this is going to go on for months. It's going to go on for some time, maybe over a year. In order for them to do what they have to do to make their people safe, it's going to take many, many months. But I am afraid that Benjamin Netanyahu has set forth conditions for victory that are unattainable, because he's not only saying we have to degrade Hamas's warfighting capability and destroy them as a governmental institution. He's saying we have to get rid of the ideology that caused them to be that way in the first place. And that is a very tall order, because that ideology is simply radical Islamic terror. And there are hundreds of millions of radical Islamic terrorists all over the world. You're not going to kill those people. I worry that he is not defining victory in a way that is attainable.
Well, we'll see what happens as we go through the war. Chuck Holton, thanks for joining us. Up next, while fighting continues in Gaza, the race for the White House is heating up in America. We take a look at how Israel's war with Hamas is affecting U.S. politics when we come back. All eyes are on the Middle East as concerns grow that Israel's war against Hamas could expand into a regional conflict. Meanwhile, in the U.S., Republicans and Democrats are vying for the White House. I spoke to CBN News Middle East analyst John Waggy about what impact the war is having on American politics. John, you've been reporting on the Middle East for almost 30 years and reporting on U.S. politics even longer. Tell us, how would you connect the dots right now between what's going on in Gaza, here in Israel, and Hezbollah, and American politics, presidential politics here in 2024?
Wow. Yeah, all of that, Chris. It's amazing. I mean, this war, you're on one side of the Atlantic here in Israel, and you're seeing the people go in the middle of an existential struggle where they don't even know how they're going to get through this. I mean, just in your day-to-day life. And then you see on the American side, they're trying to impose what's best in a political race on the people here. And so it's a very strange thing. So you have, for instance, Joe Biden earlier this month was trying to hit home about the dangers of white supremacy in the United States and speaking in an African-American church in South Carolina. And he gets shouted down by anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian demonstrators in the middle of that, and that was the media takeaway from the whole thing. You've got people tying up virtually every entrance and exit from Manhattan, people just shutting it down, while Jewish Americans are watching this and thinking, this is a pro-Hamas demonstration in a town where more than 1 million Jews live. You know, it's a dichotomy that's hard to face, and it is affecting the political race.
Mm-hmm. So we see since October 7th, you know, the Democratic Party really has been shifting, and because of this pro-Palestinian, actually to some degree pro-Hamas demonstrators that are really pulling, even some of the Biden staffers in his campaign, some of them in the State Department, wrote a letter to say that there should be an immediate ceasefire, and really coming against some of this pro-Israel stance of President Biden.
It's woven deep into the Democratic base, and you can see it in the polls, where a majority of young people support the Palestinian cause rather than the Israeli cause. And you look at Republicans, 75% of all Republicans support Israel, 80% of evangelical Christians. So there's a divide right there. On top of that, though, this divide within the Democratic Party isn't getting that much attention, except for when President Biden gets heckled or something like that. But what's really happening is Democrats are saying, do we really want this guy to be our nominee again, when we don't support in any way, shape, or form his policy in the Middle East? And then you've got traditional Jewish Democrats who are seeing their fellow Jews in Israel fighting an existential battle, and the anti-Semitism growing exponentially on campuses where many times Jews are concerned for their health or their life. And that presents a dichotomy to them. So you ask the question, what happens on the ground where young people are foot soldiers in a political campaign? What happens when your donors, Jewish donors who just pulled their support from colleges like Penn, University of Penn, and others are contemplating it? So what happens to a political campaign which money is the mother's milk of politics, and at the same time, the young people are the foot soldiers, and you're Joe Biden trying to hold it all together in early 2024.
Yeah. It seems like they're trying to thread the needle right now. They're trying, on the one hand, keep the traditional Jewish supporters of the Democratic Party and the Jewish state. On the other hand, you have people like, you know, the pulling Biden the other direction, and it comes down to one key state. I'm sure there's many more, but one key state in particular is Michigan. We have a lot of Arab voters there that could swing this state against Biden.
Yes, but Michigan's not the only one. All kinds of battleground states have the same issue for the Democrats, where they really need the Jewish support, they need the Jewish money, they need the Jewish turnout. And are they going to get it? And are they going to get the Muslim turnout if they keep supporting Israel? Because the Muslims don't like to see, and they've got a big population, as you mentioned, in Michigan.
And so how do you see this playing out? Here we are, January 2024, of November is coming up. How do you see this playing out in the next several months?
Chris, you've been to the North several times now. What happens if this war widens? Then what happens to the political battles in the United States? You know, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I would say the Biden administration is going to have to reset whatever they're thinking if the North opens up. And also here, John, you know, we don't see much support at all for a Palestinian state and a two-state solution. It's really dead on arrival.
Not only that, but you've seen that the people in the North want the same thing that the people around Gaza have gotten, an all-out attack on their enemies. And that hasn't happened in the North yet. And I don't think they're going to settle for anything different. You've talked to them more than I have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they want Hezbollah taken care of, just like Hamas in the South, they want taken care of. So we're going to see all this play out this coming year, John.
Yeah.
Thanks for your insight, analysis, and we'll be continuing to talk about this throughout the year.
Thanks, Chris.
Coming up, evangelical leaders bear witness to Hamas's massacre. See how they're standing with Israel during her darkest hour. U.S. evangelical leaders recently visited a Jewish community attacked by Hamas on October 7th. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl accompanied them and heard their reaction to what they saw and described as pure evil.
This is Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Situated along the Gaza border, it was one of 22 communities attacked by Hamas on October 7th.
In this location, young families were massacred, kidnapped, raped, babies were set on fire, and it all happened right here.
Ambassador Danny Danone brought evangelical leaders, including Governor Mike Huckabee and Governor Sam Brownback, to Kfar Aza as part of a solidarity mission to Israel.
We are here to remind to the international community that we haven't forgotten what happened. That is the reason that we are now in Gaza chasing after Hamas, and we are determined to complete the mission.
Ilan Biyum lives with his family on Kibbutz Kfar Aza. His son Yuval was killed in the massacre. He lived in the next generation neighborhood with young people 18 and up who had moved out of their parents' homes but stayed in the community. It was right next to the border fence with Gaza.
At the morning of the attack, we spent some time over the phone speaking. All the time he says that he can hear them, and they even tried to open his door. But at that time, they just tried and they just moved on. And we hope that maybe they won't come back, but they did. And about 12:30, we just lost contact with him.
This peaceful fence behind me was one of the places where the horrors began on October 7th. Hundreds of Hamas terrorists crashed through the gate into Kibbutz Kfar Aza. They murdered dozens. They took 18 hostages back into Gaza. This is the reality that people are living with. The 900 residents here have evacuated to another place. Some will come back. Many probably won't.
My family is afraid to come back, but if you ask me personally, I feel that I have something unfinished here, so I feel like I left my son here. So I feel I want to come back, regardless of how safe it is. But as for feeling safe here, it will take a long time to build the trust again in the government and in the army, because the reason that we lived here is that we knew that at the moment that anyone crosses the fence of Gaza back there, the army will react and will prevent any form of attack on the kibbutz. And it didn't happen.
Israel Defense Forces Reserve Captain Maya briefed the leaders on the story of Kfar Aza.
The community here has suffered a great loss. And these people, they are the people that believed in peace and worked towards peace. And they were murdered, again, in inhumane and brutal and barbaric ways in their own houses.
Governor Huckabee says he's been coming to Israel for 50 years, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw.
I just want the world to understand, this was not a military effort to attack the military of Israel. This was to slaughter innocent civilians and children and women and elderly people. This is not the act of civilized human beings. This is the act of savages.
He called it an attack on humanity and said Israel must eradicate Hamas.
This is not a political issue. It's not socioeconomic. It's not geographical. This is not horizontal, left and right. This is vertical. This is up and down, heaven and hell. This is good versus evil. And this was evil, what happened here.
Governor Brownback said he was stunned by the carnage.
The collective shock in the country is palpable. It was not a bomb, it was personal hand-to-hand carnage. The people stared somebody else in the eye and shot them. Babies. The level of depravity and brutality is really stunning.
He said no one wants collateral damage in Gaza, but Israel has to protect itself.
And you see those signs across the United States and people saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, that means running everybody of Israel out into the ocean. And Israel has a right to defend itself, and we should stand with Israel's right to defend itself.
Brownback noted that Iran is behind it all and getting away with it.
So to me, two lessons are here. You got to start confronting Iran directly, or you're going to continue to see this and you'll see it again. And the second is really allow the Palestinians to emigrate to other nations.
For now, Danone says the world must give Israel time.
You cannot fight evil with a stop clock, telling you, okay, that's it, let's finish it. It's not easy. They are hiding behind civilians, they are hiding in tunnels. They took the money of the world to dig an undercover town in Gaza. So it's not an easy operation. It's the longest war that we ever conducted, and we intend to win that war.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kfar Aza, southern Israel.
Still ahead, thousands of Israelis cry out to God asking for mercy and for the return of every hostage. As Israel approaches 100 days of war and captivity for the more than 100 hostages, Israeli religious leaders called for a prayer gathering at the Western Wall. Tens of thousands responded. Take a look. Thousands of Jews came here to the Western Wall, including the families of those kidnapped, the injured, soldiers. They came to cry out, plead, and invoke heavenly mercy upon all of Israel.
We are Jews who believe that by the power of prayer, we can change everything, to do much better, to operate much better. We're people who seek only good, and therefore we stood here, tens of thousands of people, and we ask God that He'll heal the wounded, that He'll return the hostages, that He'll protect the soldiers, that He'll do good in the world, that He'll bring peace to the world.
Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich, chief rabbis of Israel, and other rabbis led the prayers at one of the holiest sites in Judaism. It was the biggest gathering at the Western Wall in Jerusalem since the October 7th war began. He told CBN News, seeing all the different parts of Israeli society, religious and secular, come together as one, really touched him.
We are a generation that needs to unite. The 7th of October changed things. Until then, we had a year with lots of arguments. This year, since the 7th of October, we see differently. We see the people of Israel. It turns out that on the inside, they are together. On the inside, they love one another.
During the prayer, shofars and trumpets were sounded. Special prayers were prayed for the well-being of IDF soldiers, the recovery of the wounded, and the return of the captives. Representatives of the captives' families took part in reciting psalms.
I'm feeling strong now. With all of the people are here, coming to be with us, the hostages' families.
Adi's brother, Shlomi Ziv, was kidnapped while working at the Nova Festival. Some hundreds of Israelis were murdered there and dozens of others taken hostage.
What we have without faith, hope, and unity, and praying for God, praying everyone in His way, for the people to come back home, for the health of the injured.
Though it's not easy, she says the people of Israel live.
We know that the government will bring our brothers and sisters, all the hostages, home. And we are supporting the ministry and the IDF and all the forces to bring our families together again, and the heart will be whole again.
Israeli-American Eli Lipschitz says while Israel is fighting back on a physical level, there's more to be done.
There's also a feeling that we need to connect on a spiritual level, to connect everybody together, to pray, to shout out, to scream at what's going on, and to pray to God to help us to bring back the hostages and make sure that everybody that's in harm's way will be safe.
Lipschitz says there's an awakening as to what is going on and what Israel is fighting for.
Obviously, the horrific terrorist attack was an attack against Jews. It's against Jews everywhere. We're fighting a fight that the world's going to be fighting. If it's not going to be fought in Israel, it's going to be fought everywhere else. And it's important that people gather around both praying to God and supporting Israel physically and spiritually, because this is the right war and this is a just war and something that we don't have a choice but to win. We have no place else to go.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And remember to continue to pray for the safety of the IDF soldiers, all those caught in harm's way, and for the safe return of all the hostages. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.